The ongoing saga of the Grexit after the referendum continues. Joining us on the programme this week, it's a great honour to have back with us former Finance Minister of Cyprus, Michalis Sarris, who has also worked with the World Bank, I think, and many other big organisations. Michalis, first of all, your take on what's been going on for the last actually 5 months. It's not just the last 2 weeks, is it?
Yes, it's really an unfolding drama. I think with the ultimate victim, the Greek people really, who have to suffer the consequences of whatever comes out. I think it's fairly clear now, without assigning any blame to start with, that 5 valuable months have been wasted, meaning that we are broadly now where we were when all this adventure started. Then there is, of course, a very big question now. Are we close to an agreement? Will it be possible for Greece to come up with a plan that would be acceptable to the institutions and to the governments of the member countries that will be asked to ratify this program? Because as you appreciate, we are now out of the programs that were already ongoing, and it was relatively easier in the sense that you didn't need all the formalities of parliaments. So a program that would pass that test and at the same time it would be acceptable to the Greek people, because as you know, the current government made many promises, most of which clearly cannot be fulfilled, at least in the short term.
I think there's a feeling in Europe that any reform package proposed by Greece needs to be passed by their parliament before it will be accepted by the lenders. That indicates a complete lack of trust now in the Greek government keeping its word.
That is an underlying theme that I think has poisoned the whole process. The Europeans in general and the people dealing with Greece have come to the conclusion that they cannot rely on the word. And it's not just, I fear, Rosie, of this government. I think part of the tragedy is that Greece agreed to a balanced program at the beginning, which would have implied fiscal consolidation, but at the same time reform that would have given some chance to growth to resume. The previous governments have done precious little in that area. So we are left with the pain without the possibility of gain. So that mistrust dates back. At the same time, the Greek people have a sense that the solidarity that they expected by being a member of the European Union and the Eurozone has not been forthcoming. So on both sides there is this mistrust. And that, I think, will make the agreement more difficult, because I think the institutions will insist on frequent and thorough policing of what's going on. The Greeks now, the new government, are very allergic to this spectacle of being policed on a constant basis by these people in dark glasses and dark suits coming into the Greek ministries and asking questions. So that mistrust is underlying this process. And we need something to break this. I think right now the formula that could work is for the Germans to relax their strong antipathy to debt relief. It is an antipathy, by the way, that is based on raw politique. I think the German Chancellor judges that she cannot pass from her parliament an agreement that forgives debt without upfront action, which goes back to that mistrust. I think we need to do something. I think they need to come to some statement that, without actually forgiving debt now, gives a very definite hope that once the program begins to be implemented, then I think there will be some debt relief. The Americans are playing, just to complete that thought, an important role there. The Americans are looking at the geopolitical fallout of this that could be substantial. And they also see that this debt situation could be part of the solution, and that's why they forced the IMF to disclose that report just before the referendum, saying that the Greek debt, as it is now, is unsustainable in the sense that it puts too heavy a stone around the throat of the Greek economy.
Well, I think everybody understands that. I mean, they can't actually even get close to paying off the debt itself. They're still paying interest, aren't they? And it's going up all the time. So we know it's not sustainable. But having said that, you've got a situation where the Greeks are saying, first, you must give us debt relief, then we will do reforms. And you've got the Germans and the rest of the Eurozone saying, no, first you need to propose and pass your reforms, and then we'll talk about debt relief. They're still playing chicken.
They are indeed, and this is a little bit like a child's play. You go first, I go first. If you don't go, I don't go. And this is where a statesman type of behavior is needed, where you take some chances on both sides. I think the goal of not derailing the European project, the European dream, I think it would be unthinkable to my mind and to many people that we have the Acropolis and the Parthenon outside the European edifice. I think that everybody wants to avoid. It's not just a question of how will financial markets react for a couple of days. That I think we can handle. We have enough expertise now to. It's more the idea that even a misbehaving member of the family is not allowed to repent and come back into the family. On the other hand, we have to be fair. The Greeks have made it very difficult for anybody to be forgiving and understanding. The rhetoric, the theatrics, substitution of this lecturing. I mean, the idea that you would go to Europe and be armed by the fact that you have a recent strong political mandate, that the problem is not really in Greece, but in the European architecture that allowed Greece to borrow too much. And the idea that I don't talk to technocrats because I want to talk to presidents and chancellors is clearly counterproductive. I am convinced that had the Greeks benefited from the sympathy they had after this election, most people felt that the program of austerity was too brutal in Greece, too much, over too soon, focused on too few people.
So if they'd come up with a decent proposal and started implementing it back at the beginning of the year, do you think things would have been different? I mean, a lot of blame has been attached to the approach of Varoufakis, hasn't it?
Yes. Look, Varoufakis, of course, expresses a point of view. There are many backbenchers in the party that are very militant. Actually, it is a bit, in my view, with all due respect, they live in a different age. I mean, the clock for many of them has stopped at the time of the antagonism between the Soviet Union and the United States. They believe in that a centrally planned economy in which the government is compassionate to the workers and all these things, which unfortunately life has moved on. Europe now believes in a system of mixed enterprise with market forces really being the guiding principle. If you have a lot of people that don't believe that, which unfortunately it's this mosaic of people that make up the Syriza, then that makes life difficult.
But should we look again at the whole European project in terms of the financial side of things? They've been talking, and a lot of people have said all along, we've discussed it before, how can you have a currency that doesn't actually have unity across the bloc in terms of fiscal policy and all the rest of it?
Yes, indeed, there is plenty wrong with the architecture. It was a project that had political motive. When Germany was reunified, the message had to come from Germany that we are committed to a peaceful Europe, and the euro was part of it, but because they could not agree to go all the way. For example, to have a federal budget like in the United States. At the time that the euro was put together, many people expressed doubts. They made comparisons with the United States. They said we have a country that people watch the same TV shows. They go from state to state. The federal budget dominates all budgets. We have a problem in Alabama and nobody complains that it's the dollars of the New Yorkers or the Californians that fix it. Somebody goes from North Carolina to Boston to work and they don't say it's the East Europeans that are coming to take our jobs. I mean, there is a tremendous difference there. So we had a gap between what was being designed and the underlying realities. This came to the surface when some of the rules were disobeyed, not followed, and crisis management was really found to be wanting. It was a total mess, the way the Greek crisis was handled. This vindictiveness against moral hazard, meaning that they did not reward bad behavior by forgiving debt. Now they regret that had they done so in 2010, with 200 billion, you could have reduced dramatically the Greek debt, at the same time enforce a very strict program.
But then there's the argument that austerity isn't working, that it's actually stifling growth, that it's cutting the income coming into the government. People are out of work, the outgoings are more than the incomings. And then there's this question of where the money that Greeks got went. And a lot of it was to save, dare we say it yet again, the banks. Yes. Now, what is the role of the banks in all of this? Some of them have made a lot of money, and then we see Europe almost falling apart.
Yes, I think, first of all, I think we have to be more balanced on the question of austerity. There are plenty of examples in this crisis. Cyprus is one. Ireland is another, Portugal is another, Spain is another, where a more balanced program of fiscal consolidation, which is really the proper name of austerity. Austerity really means that you have to stop living beyond your means. And the question is how? Because you cannot continue forever spending more than you have if nobody will lend you the money. So there, I think...
But can I just stop you there? For years and years, when it was obvious that Greece wasn't implementing those fiscal consolidation measures, the reforms and so on, they kept getting money lent to them. And so they were basically being helped to dig themselves into a deeper hole.
I think that's a fair comment. I think they were doing, the fiscal was proceeding well. There was more contraction of the deficit in Greece than in any other country in modern history. What was not happening are the more difficult structural measures, the privatizations, liberalizing professions, fixing the social insurance system, making sure that the labor markets work so that employers have an incentive to employ people, that they don't have to pay so much into all kinds of charges and making it impossible to fire people. So that, I think, was a mess. I think it is also fair to say what you just said, that the first assistance that went to Greece was designed as much to help Greece as it was to help the European financial system by bailing out primarily German and French banks, which have lent to Greece too much money before. So they were able to get their money back. We in Cyprus were dramatically victimized by that because our two big banks lost about 4 to 5 billion. The Greek banks got their money through more borrowing. So there it was a complete mess. But the Europeans justify that by saying, look, we have to worry about the stability of the financial system all over the place. And Greece happened to be the first country in which this mess emerged.
You're a banker, I'm certainly not. But my understanding is that good banking practice looks at risk before it lends.
Yes. Risk not just in Cyprus, was seriously underpriced, seriously underestimated on the altar of quick profit. There were many things that made it easier. For example, the implication that you could lend to any country in Europe and somehow the Europeans collectively would pay you back if that country failed. That's the only explanation of why people were lending to Greece at the same interest rate as Germany, when they knew that the fundamentals were completely wrong. Banking, bank boards, bank governance, bank management failed. Bank supervision failed even more, guided by the European Central Bank that advised the so-called light touch supervision. Trust the banks to make the right decision. A terrible mistake. So a combination of all these factors and a lot of bubbles in the economy. For example, in the Cypriot economy, it's not just that they were lending too much, but they were lending too much in the wrong sector, that is the construction sector, where there was a huge bubble. When the music stopped, not enough chairs for people to sit down, and you have this big crisis. So yes, the banking behavior is at the heart of this problem.
So what's to be done? And it's interesting that you also mention the fact that the reforms not carried out are the difficult ones in Greece. Privatisations, the public sector and so on. Those are the very reforms that we still have to do here in Cyprus. And it's a little worrying to me that elections are coming up before too very long and we haven't yet really completed what we need to do, have we?
Absolutely. I think on the public sector, we are now making progress in, I think, thinking through and coming up with good ideas of how to create more incentives to align paying to performance. I think the minister at the presidency and his team are doing good work. And I believe that the unions that have not been in the past particularly forthcoming, particularly during the good years where it seemed like, let's join in this party, I think now they understand that things have to be different. So I am hopeful that in the public sector we will have changes in the right direction. On the privatization front, again, there is too much ideology. It's a very practical issue. I think some things will be easier than others. I think in the telephone business, I think we should be able to move fairly quickly. I think any blockage there, in my view, it doesn't make sense. I think it could go. It will be more difficult in power, because it's a big mess there. It's a small economy, production is antiquated, there are too many people working. So there, I think it will take more time. But we are fortunate in some sense here in Cyprus, because I think the institutions of the Troika does not want to make another case of where things are not going right. So we are going to get the benefit of some time that while Greece looks so terrible, people that are sort of three-quarters right, they look like angels. So I think we should make good use of that credit of time.
And back to where we started and the possibility of a Grexit. What would be the implications for Europe? We know what the implications are for Greece, I think,
yes.
But how would it impact on the rest of the Eurozone? They do say they've got firewalls in place. What do they mean?
Well, I think they mean most of the Greek debt now is owned by the IMF, the ECB, and European countries. So it is spread around. It is not a detail, but it is not the same as having put a lot of financial institutions in jeopardy. So from that point of view, the impact will translate into, I believe, higher borrowing rates as people begin to factor in the risk that this could happen elsewhere. So we will ask for a premium if we're going to lend to Cyprus, to Spain, Portugal, Italy, some of the countries that have substantial debt problem and are also hesitating in some of the things that need to be done. But overall, I think the psychological impact, the first country to come out, it was so unthinkable that there are no provisions of what you do if a country leaves the Eurozone. What do you do with it? That's what I fear. They fear the worst, I think, and that's why they ask the 28 to gather on Sunday to ask them and to pass a resolution that if Greece goes bankrupt and leaves the Eurozone, it is allowed to stay in the European Union and gets into the road of perhaps coming back at some point.
The problem actually is that nobody really knows because we're in uncharted waters, aren't we?
Absolutely. We really don't know. We really don't know. And I think we should not want to find out. I think it is one of those things that it's an experience that we don't want to live. Particularly we Greek Cypriots and Cypriots in general, we are close to the seismic event and we're going to feel it more than others. Not in ways that are traditionally, but I think, for example...
Well, we have a lot of business ties with Greece,
we
don't
have
we?
a lot of
there
business,
will be fallout.
But also, do you know, most of us called our Greek friends to say, my friend, we are near you. Just like they called us in March of 2013, saying, my friend, you have friends here. So there is a lot of solidarity on a family-to-family basis, because these are very, very difficult times, I think. At the same time, though, we have to tell the truth. I mean, I have been on some Greek television programs in which I was in minority saying some of the things that I am telling you, because there were ships passing in the night with their lights turned off. You know, the Greeks talking amongst themselves saying, we have a strong mandate, we said, Ochi, we're going to teach these guys. And the other guys on the other side, we also have a mandate from our people to take care of their own business. So what are these guys talking about? You know, they are not voting for a program. They can vote for whatever they like. And then somebody has to say these things, that we really need to be serious and say, put something down and go back and forth. Capitalize on the fact that the other guy doesn't want me to go bankrupt. So he'll be willing to give something and to help me pass it through Parliament. Because if I have an agreement that will not pass through Parliament, what's the point of having it? So there were ingredients there, but these theatrics were not helpful at all.